discussions on this particular subject. Prof, you're welcome to Eyewitness News.
Thank you for having me.
Initial comments or reactions to this proposal by the former senior minister?
Frankly, I find it very heartening to know that Mr. Osafo-Maafo has his views on the Access Declaration. And it's a pleasure, at least for me, to know that during the formulation or the writing of the Constitution, on this very aspect that requires the access to be declared, he stood tall, trying to convince others to agree that this section should be properly drafted to allow transparency in the declaration of assets. So my initial comment is, wow, I never knew that he has these views. He's been in government for many years, as you know. So I've never heard him talk publicly about these matters. So I find it very, very exciting that for the first time, we are getting insight to this particular section of the Constitution, the so-called cultural constraints that make people decide not to be open about their assets. But I should say that does not really surprise me. But the fact is, if anybody wants to be in public office, this cultural constraint cannot be respected. If you are going to serve the public, you must be prepared to open up, because this is a major source of corruption. And because it's not open, it's always in the drawer, we are unable to monitor public officials who just get into public service to amass wealth. So this is a very interesting debate that he has started.
Now, the cultural challenges that this particular clause faced 30 years ago are still here, which means that this proposal, if it does come up, is going to face the same opposition that the chiefs at the Constituent Assembly raised. Don't you think? Which means it's going to be really a Herculean task to see this go through.
But don't you find it interesting, Umaru, that if in fact it is the chiefs who blocked it, the chiefs are not even allowed to be in public office. So how could a group of people who have been banned from directly participating in public office be the stumbling block for opening up this particular issue?
Mind you, at the time, the Constitution was not in force. It is this Constitution that barred them. Perhaps at the time, again, it was a law that was being formulated, so their views were accepted. Even though the law anticipated that they would not take part, they possibly thought they would be affected, or maybe they didn't even know they would not be affected, and could be the reason. I don't know. This is just speculation because we're not there.
You're right. I was not there either. But just following the logic of this, Umaru, I think it gives us a new opportunity to really begin to debate this and open that section for scrutiny. Because if those who were afraid of this particular clause are banned from participating, then I think gives us a golden opportunity to revisit this case and to revise this section so that we can truly bring some transparency in the acquisition of assets by public officials. There is so much corruption, as we all know, and corruption basically, I know is widespread, but it is essentially carried on by people in public office for all kinds of reasons. So for me, this cultural thing proposed by, or narrated by the chief no longer, I don't find it tenable anymore. I don't.
The counter-argument for those who do not think that this should be declared, aside what the Honorable Osafo-Maafo raises, is the other issue about people who are already established in society, very rich people, who simply want to come into politics to serve and not to steal. These people do not want their assets known. And for that matter, they would rather shun away from coming to serve in public office if that would be the precondition for serving. How do you deal with that particular challenge too?
It could be a challenge for those who think that they've acquired assets, maybe illegitimately. Because if the society knows your hard work, your sincerity, your integrity, and you own 10 houses, I don't think anybody's going to quarrel with that. I think generally it will be those who may be afraid of how they acquire the assets that wouldn't want the public to know. Even though I do respect the fact that culturally, certain individuals or certain groups do not want to be known to be rich. And I don't know whether this came more so as a result of the so-called revolution of the 1970s, when rich people were haunted, you see. So it's a mix of things. But I think that if you want to go into public service and you are clear and the public knows of your integrity, I don't see why you should be afraid that you have 10 or 2 or how many houses, you have 3 cars, you have wherever, I'm going to serve your country. You would think that is a problem. It's hard for me to understand that. So I think it all boils down to integrity of individuals who want to serve the public. You know, in the United States and other places, and I think to some extent, Dr. Parkwasi exemplified that when he decided to enter active politics. We have something we call putting your assets in a blind trust. Nobody has to know it. You put in the blind trust, you distance yourself, especially if you are running business. You distance yourself from that so that there will be no conflict of interest when you're in public office. So there are mechanisms that society, we can create to protect those, in that kind of situation. But to give a blind statement that because I have wealth and therefore I cannot serve my country, I find it a bit ridiculous. I can't understand that. So my point is this. If you have earned your assets legitimately, there is a system to protect you if you get into public office. The whole idea is to focus on what else you acquire whilst you are in office. The asset declaration, for that matter, checking corruption, is not looking at what you had before you got into public office. There are two distinct things. So still, it's hard for me to hear this kind of argument that I have wealth and therefore if I go into public office, I'll be known to be wealthy. I don't know. Unless, of course, there may be some cultures where perhaps if you are known to be wealthy, you think you'll be killed by your own people or the witches will come after you. If those cultural beliefs are there, then I can understand that. Other than that, I don't see what is wrong with the public knowing. But again, even as I've said, there's a mechanism to protect you, to protect the asset that you have earned legitimately before you enter public service.
But Prof, typically in our communities and even in our private lives, people do not know what we have. And people there are people who even think that by people knowing that you own this, and you've mentioned witchcraft and all of that, there are several reasons why people don't want their private stuff in the public domain. Why should we publicize someone's assets because they are going to serve in public office? Is that not a breach of their privacy?
Oh, Maru, I've already said that there's a mechanism to protect you.
Yeah, so but Osafo-Maafo's proposal is it should be out there in the public for everybody to see. And I'm saying that currently, as private individuals, our properties are not out there in the public.
Correct.
So why should this guy's privacy be breached when we all respect each other's privacy and we want to protect same?
Yes. Actually, if that's what Mr. Osafo-Maafo is proposing, I would disagree with him. That if you're entering public office, your assets should be publicized. No.
I think for purpose of a better understanding and also to appreciate the matters, I want to play what he said again. So we are certain as to whether he wants it to publicize or want it publicized but controlled. Because currently you declare the assets, but it is not known to the public, only to an officer of the law as so mandated, I believe. I think the Attorney General. I think he's proposing a departure from that. Let's listen to him.
Okay.
The call generally is to Minister of Energy to publish the rationalization of the power.
Apologies.
Nobody can do it.
Okay, apologies. Not this particular. This is him talking about Dumso. Let me take you back to the main voice that I want us to listen to. Apologies for that. Let's listen again.
In Ghana, when you become a minister of state, all levels, public sector at certain levels, the first thing you do is to declare your assets and file same with the Auditor General. What I personally don't like about this law is that after you declare the assets, everything is kept confidential between the Auditor General and yourself. And therefore, it becomes very difficult for anybody to challenge the authenticity of your declaration. I think that, yes, let's declare the assets, but there should be a certain level of transparency in the declaration of the assets that people can access what you declare, also by certain procedures.
So there you have it. There should be a means of getting the information by certain procedures. I don't know. I wish he had elaborated. Perhaps he's talking about maybe you could go under the right to information law. I don't know if that's what he means, but he's simply saying that the fact that you lodge the assets declaration with the auditor, not Auditor General. I think it's Auditor General he mentioned. It's Auditor General. There's no way I would get to know.
Or Minister of Justice. We don't even know exactly who is supposed to keep this.
So he's saying that if you want to challenge anything, you can't really, because you don't even know what the guy has declared.
You see, again, there's a way to cure that. I was in Liberia as a UN governance advisor, and the Liberian Anti-Corruption Commission, they had a style. When you enter public office, they look at your assets, they take pictures and create a file for you. It's not publicized, but they take pictures and keep on your file. And when you are leaving office, they have evidence of what you had prior to you taking the office. And then they'll go again to find out if any additional assets have been acquired. So in the same way, we can have a mechanism that you declare, then it can be verified by a special group of people constituted. I don't know whether you call it commission, committee, or whatever, but through the Attorney General's office or Minister of Justice office or whichever agency we designate. They can go and verify everything you have in that kind of manner without publicizing it, you see, so that there's witness to what you had. And as he proposed, if there's a serious case requiring access to that information, then through what we have today as the Freedom of Information Act, you can have access, examine it, and just take your notes and make whatever point you want to make. So again, I'm saying that there's always a way to provide mechanisms to safeguard the private interests of individuals. All right? But again, don't forget that we are in a different age than we were 30 years ago when the Constitution was written. 30 years ago, there was nothing like iPhone Pro 14 or whatever. There was nothing like social media. There was nothing like, information floating freely everywhere. So if I go and declare I have 10 houses, you may not know who has already recorded my assets. And that's what is really checking governance these days, that if you want to rule a country and you make all kinds of promises, sooner or later, people are going to play back their own statements to haunt you. So I think we are in a different era. But at the same time, we can have answers for questions that arise from the difference that we have in terms of how we live our lives and all. So in simple terms, if we are serious about getting transparency in the acquisition of assets as a way of checking corruption in our country, certainly we can put brains together to devise a system that will seek to protect the private interests of potential public officials, while at the same time checking whether people are amassing wealth fraudulently.
Finally, is there a possibility perhaps that, this whole issue of asset declaration, it is easier said than done? Osafo-Maafo has been minister since the Kufuor days. Yes. He just recently ceased to be a minister.
Right.
If he really believed in this and thought it should happen, he should have led by example, because nothing would have stopped him from publicizing his assets if he wanted to. Don't you think maybe he should have started, becoming a leader with an example so that others would follow?
Oh, Maru, you're asking me to say things that I cannot say because I don't know his mind. I don't know why he's now coming out with this idea. But generally, let's put it this way. It's like our government system here. When a party is in opposition, they see all evil in the party in power. Nothing good. And when the tables turn, become the same way. So in other words, our politicians seem to see better when they are no longer playing active politics, which is a tragic thing for us, So you're right. I mean, maybe at that time he hadn't developed this kind of idea. Perhaps this idea came to him forcefully once he left office, and he's beginning to realize how politicians like him have been cheating the people by stealing things and corrupting things. So maybe he's a born-again politician, as we say. That's possible. That's possible.
Very possible. Very possible. But thank you so much for speaking to us, Prof.
It's my pleasure.
That's Professor Bafo Ajimandia. He is a governance analyst.